All right, well, welcome everybody. As you probably already know, this is the Deer Hunting 101 course that is in a partnership with the National Deer Association and the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. The basic idea behind this course is just to get folks starting to think about hunting. It covers a lot of basic information, why hunt, where to hunt, kind of equipment you need, and different things and information that we'll go over. So I think it's going to be a really good class. So, for folks that aren't aware, the National Deer Association is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to ensuring the future of wild deer, wildlife habitat, and hunting. You can become a member of the National Deer Association if you go to their website. There's a section on there to join to become a member. And they do their four pillars of their organization. They focus on conservation and disease through a lot of research programs. They fund a lot of state agencies to be able to conduct those research as well. They focus heavily on the R3, which is recruit, retain, and reactivate, which is also the same thing that the Department of Wildlife Resources focuses on as well. And so that's really what we're doing today. We're engaging folks through the education and outreach. We're trying to get some folks to get started with hunting that may have never hunted before, and then keep those folks hunting year after year after year. They also do a lot of focus on policy and advocacy for white-tailed deer and deer species in general across the United States. So they have folks that look at legal requirements, regulations, and any laws that are going across states and help guide and focus those to positive ones for conservation and hunters as well. And then once again, like we're doing today, there's the education and outreach portion. So if you're interested in joining or becoming an NDA member, or you just want to know more information, don't hesitate to reach out to us so we can talk more about that as well. All right, so I want to start us off with a trivia question, just get people thinking. So, what's the most studied big game animal in North America? And you can feel free to turn your mic on, or you can just type it in the chat as well. Does anybody want to take a shot on that? Let me pull this back up here.
White-tailed deer.
There you go, white-tailed deer, right? Guessing deer. Yep, deer. Awesome. So yeah, a lot of folks do that. So deer are the most studied big game species in North America, which is why the NDA focuses on those as well. But also, we're going to speak about deer hunting today. So for the first portion of this, I wanted to go over a little bit of history of deer conservation phases in North America and kind of why hunting today, how it got started. I think it's really important to go over these because you hear a lot of things in the media about hunting, and most of the stuff we see nowadays is a negative aspect of hunting. If anybody's following in Virginia, they just had the Hollywood buck case, which is a deer that was in Hollywood Cemetery. It was a really beautiful buck, and then somebody went out and poached it. And so generally, you hear a lot of negative connotations towards hunting. So I wanted to go over, how hunting got started in America and how it came to be today to where we are. Just kind of give folks that reason on why you should hunt. So we're going to start back at 1500 to about the 1800 level. So people started coming into America. The colonists made their way over here. So skins traded to colonists became a big thing for the native folks. The demand for these skins really started to soar off, and pelts became a colonial currency. So if anybody's heard the term a buck, like I'll pay a buck for that, that actually is a literal term of trading a buck pelt for something. And so these skins are really a currency too, which is where traditional hunting got started in America. So moving up from 1800 to 1860, so in the early 1800s, due to the decline in fur sales, the natural expansion of deer into new habitats, populations are on the rise again. So as people started colonizing the east portion of the United States, deer habitats started getting lost, and they were kind of pushing into other areas. And then as folks stayed on the eastern part and didn't move west, those deer were able to make kind of a comeback in that area. As we move on up there, European exploration. So farther decline continued due to much of the part of the practices. So we began deforestation. We didn't have any regulations at that time, and market hunting really took off. And market hunting in America wasn't just for deer. It included birds, bison, shorebirds, eagles, ducks, etc. And so if you read a lot of history, there's story after story of one of them was somebody talked about shooting 33 bald eagles in one day. And so that's real. Market hunting took off. And there was also stories of certain tribes would run 300 bison off of cliffs to harvest their pelts and things. So there wasn't any regulation. People saw plenty of game, so they were out there shooting game and harvesting their pelts, selling their pelts, and things like that. So we move up to 1975. So Theodore Roosevelt heard a lot of stories of going out west and hunting bison, and so he wanted to go out and try to hunt a bison for himself. But as he ventured farther west, he realized that all the stories he heard of these plethora of bison, when he actually got out there, wasn't true. There was very few bison on the landscape, and so it started to get him thinking about wildlife populations, and something was going on that was making these decline at a rapid rate. And so in that process, him and another guy named Grinnell decided to start the Boone and Crockett Club. This happened in 1887, and the Boone and Crockett Club is the oldest wildlife conservation organization. It was founded by hunters who wanted to dedicate their lives to wildlife conservation. So this really started to begin people thinking of conservation and wildlife species, and then really applying ethics to hunting as well. So then also in the 1900s, they passed the Federal Lacey Act. Does anybody want to take a shot or know what that is? I'm going to pull this chat back up here. So does anybody know what the Federal Lacey Act, or want to take a stab at what that does for us? It is what sends hunting license fees to conservation. Yeah, so sort of. So the Federal Lacey... we got some more chats coming through. So the Federal Lacey Act actually is what prohibits the illegal trafficking of fish and wildlife and plants. So this was implemented in Teddy Roosevelt's era as well. And that started the process of making it illegal to prohibit trafficking of fish, wildlife, and plants. We also started the beginning of the National Wildlife Refuge System. And so that's a network of public lands and waters managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So today, since that started, we have 570 national wildlife refuges, 38 wetland management districts, and 5 national monuments that have, which totals to 856 million area of land and water. So that's quite a bit of process there that provides us with public land for us to hunt as well. So farthering this history as we go along, we got protection and recovery. So from 1900 to 1975, we started the U.S. Forest Service was formed. The first game management book was written by Aldo Leopold. So people began to start thinking about conservation, ethics, applying these things to hunting and fishing, and really started getting focused on those processes. Then also in 1937, they began the Pittman-Robertson Act. And so this act we talk heavily about because manufacturers of ammunition, guns, archery equipment all pay an 11% excise tax on anytime you buy guns, ammo, and archery equipment. So that tax actually goes... let me get to my slide. There you go. So that tax is set by law. Those funds are distributed to the federal government through those manufacturers, and then those funds are then turned around and distributed back to the states based on land mass and total license sales. And so states have a 2-year process to use those funds for conservation, and if they don't use them within 2 years, then those funds get transferred back to the Migratory Bird Fund. And so it's a complete cycle here that is funded strictly by hunters. And so that's another positive reason to get into hunting. So if we take that information that we just went over and we look at our graph here, so in 1500 we had a good number of deer. Looks like right around 28,000 deer, or 28 million deer. And then through market hunting, habitat loss, no regulations, pelt sale, those numbers started to decline in the 1800s. So we lost a good number of deer. And then we can see there was a spike in those populations like we talked about, and then it made a significant drop down to 1900. Then once we started applying regulations, talking about conservation, talking about being an ethical hunter, and those various things, we can see that population spiked way back up to where we actually have more deer today than we did pre-colonial time. And so this system really works, and it's all funded and produced by folks who go out and hunt. So if we talk about ethics and ethics behind that, does anybody know the story of how the teddy bear came to be? And this one, feel free to turn your microphone on because it's a little bit, if anybody knows what that is.
I don't know the whole story, but it's named after Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, correct, right? Anybody else know? Or
Well, from what I read, Mike, Teddy went out west, and I think it was with the last of the mountain men, Ben Lilly, and they ended up. I think they used dogs and treed a cub, and Teddy Roosevelt wouldn't harvest that cub bear, and I think that's part of how that came about.
yeah, so you're right. You're right on the head. Same thing with the Teddy Roosevelt. So a little bit more detail is they, just like Jason mentioned, that he wanted to hunt a black bear, so they went out and they found a guide for him, and so he was out hunting with all these other politicians and big name people in America, and so everyone else had gotten a bear except for Teddy Roosevelt. And so the guide was starting to get really self-conscious that he couldn't get the president at the time a black bear. So he told Teddy Roosevelt to sit in a particular spot, and he went out and he got a black bear and tied a rope around it, and he started to bring it back and tied it to a tree. And so he went and got the president and brought the president over and said, "Wait right here, I've got this black bear for you." And then as soon as Teddy Roosevelt saw that it was tied to a rope, he decided, he was like, "I'm not going to shoot that bear. That's unethical practice, and it's not a wild animal anymore." And so this story got a hold of by the American news public at the time, and they ran with it. And then one of the toy manufacturers ended up making a bear, and he named it the teddy bear after this story. So it just shows, that people started taking about ethics and hunting, and it's no longer just about killing animals at this point. So all of that leads into what we have today, so the present time. And so this is where, again, we talked about deer population skyrocketed. So it went up to 2010, back up to that 30 million, and now we're actually above that from pre-colonial time, to the point now to where we actually have to implement deer management programs for healthy ecosystems, herds, and habitats. So I've got another trivia question here for us to keep us engaged. Is this true or false? The average adult whitetail consumes 1 ton of food per year. All right, we got a couple people saying false, a couple people saying true. Looks like I've got quite a few trues coming through. Yeah, so that is true. So this gets in to start, why do we care about hunting deer? Just like we talked about, they consume 1 ton of food per year. And so we really get into, unless we have some type of regulation in hunting these species, we're going to get into an overpopulation phase. And what that does is it creates a lot of disease issues like chronic wasting disease and tick-borne pathogens. We'll talk a little bit more about chronic wasting disease later when we get into the basics of regulations, laws, and things like that, because Virginia has chronic wasting disease, and so there's going to be special regulations depending on which county you decide to hunt. But a high population of deer creates more of a prevalence of diseases as well. Just like we talked about, they eat 1 ton of food per year, so we end up seeing a lot of landscape impacts. They can negatively impact the ecosystem. So if anybody's ever heard the term called a browse line, in areas where there's a large population of deer, you'll actually go out to a forest, and anywhere from ground level to about 6 to 8 feet up, you can see completely across the forest. And that's where deer in high population areas have gone through, and they've actually ate out all of that undergrowth and young growth in those forests to as high as they can reach. It also causes a lot of impacts on agricultural, timber, and ornamental planting damage. and then also deer vehicle collisions such as damage, injury, and fatalities as well. So really regulating and managing these deer through hunting is one of the best conservation practices that we can do. So positive impacts of hunting. We have 14.4 million people that hunt in America, and this is off of statistics that were in 2022, which generates a total of 45.2 billion economic impact across the United States. Sport, fish, and wildlife restoration grants issue out about 1 billion to the state agencies annually, and that doesn't just go to deer. So even though we're focusing heavily on deer, these conservation projects and habitat work affects all species and not just the white-tailed deer. It generates more than 680,000 American jobs. Over 50% of all money spent and 70% of all time afield by hunters is whitetail focused. So we talked about them being the number one studied animal, but they generate the great portion of this money and people that hunt these as well. Also, one of the big reasons that everybody gets into hunting is they're an excellent source of protein that's lean and healthy for folks. And hunting builds a community and relationships with one another. There's a lot of traditions in America of, passing down hunting through generations, but even folks like myself that didn't grow up in a hunting family, I've come to find a community of folks that I really enjoy spending time with and that we can relate with one another. We moved a little bit quicker than I thought, but let's go ahead and take about a 10-minute break, let folks stretch their legs, get a drink, do a couple things. If y'all don't mind being back around 7 o'clock, that'd be great. And please also use this time too to ask any questions, chat in the thing, kind of introduce yourselves. Is anybody, which counties is everybody coming from, or states even? So we've got one question here too that's talking about the mentor program from the DWR and wondering how that worked out. So the mentor program, some of y'all got an email about that already, and the reason is they actually had to put a deadline for that, which unfortunately we've already passed. And the reason being is we just don't have enough mentors to support the folks that are asking for mentors. So to give that quality time with folks and not leave folks waiting on a waiting list for a long period of time, they ended up putting a deadline on that. So this past Sunday was the deadline. However, it's going to open back up again. So just keep checking back on the Department of Wildlife Resources website and our workshop areas and see when that opens back up again. If you did sign up for the mentor program, what will end up happening is they will pair you with a mentor in Virginia who is located within your area, or hopefully located close to your area. Once you get paired up with that person, they'll reach out to you and begin conversation. And so they'll generally figure out what the best way of communication for you is, whether it be phone calls, whether it be, thanks Paul, Paul provided a link there. Whether it be phone calls, email, text notifications, something along those lines. And then they'll start chatting with you about what your interests are, what you're looking to do, and then they'll most likely take you out on a mentored hunt after they've gotten your proper license regulations and things covered. And so you'll actually be able to hunt with that person, and they'll be able to walk you through that. So it's a little more intimate experience because you'll be one-on-one with somebody. But it also goes along the same lines as our clinics and workshops that the Department of Wildlife Resources holds, and we'll go over those here in a little bit in more detail. Looks like we got a person from Nevada. I think they win the farthest award. Chesapeake, Grayson, Fairfax, Rockingham, Augusta, Roanoke, Floyd, Fairfax. Nice. Does anybody have any more questions up to this point? Again, you can use the chat, or you're welcome to turn your microphone on and ask as well. Since I'll give folks a few more minutes on their break.
For some reason, I don't have access to the chat. But I'm in Falls Church, Fairfax County, getting started bow hunting. For some place nearby where I could get started.
Okay, you said you're looking for a place nearby?
Place to go, yeah, place to hunt. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let me see here. I'll go over here in a little bit. I'm going to go over a feature that will help out with that. Let me see. I'm not super familiar with Falls Church area.
Well, it's a city, but Fairfax County, somewhere in Northern Virginia, hopefully.
Oh,
I am retired military, so I do have access to Fort Belvoir. I'm planning to go there, but looking for
you got Quantico, the military base. You've also got one of our WMA properties, Phelps, near you, and there's another WMA property up in that area as well.
You said Phelps, Phelps?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so somebody else in here also asked about talk about scent. Sure. Are we looking specifically about, are you wondering about like personal scent on your body or wind direction or just how well deer can smell scent?
Yeah, just in general, This is Zishan, by the way. I'm in Fairfax County. I'm new to hunting. I have actually signed up for the deer management program by Fairfax County.
Yeah.
It's a lottery system, and if you're picked, you can hunt in parks. So I'm looking forward to it. I was lucky to get into the program. I've read a lot about, how you need to take a shower and, don't put any perfume or anything like that. But some say don't care. They don't care. So I'm just curious what your experience is. What do you do? Thank
Sure.
you.
So Jeff Pease that's on here, he's a big bow hunter, and him and I actually go back and forth on this quite a bit. I'm under the mindset that I don't typically worry about it as much unless it's something super strong, like if you accidentally spill gasoline on your pants or something. But I think, to me, what matters the most is what the wind's doing. So if you really focus on the wind direction, that's going to be your biggest takeaway, because deer use their nose quite a bit, and they actually use that before their visual sight. And so it's pretty amazing when you get out there and actually get to watch them. And I've had this happen before. You'll see them walking, and they're not even looking your direction, and then they'll stick their nose up in the air, and they'll take a couple sniffs, and then they'll turn and look right at you. And it's almost like their nose can pinpoint exactly where you're at. And most of that, though, from my experience, is just because it's been downwind. So I generally, before I go out, I will look at what the wind direction is doing, the wind speed, and I'll try to plan my spots around that. So if the wind is blowing from the west to the east, I will try to go out and hunt somewhere where behind me is not a section that I either can hunt or want to hunt. And so the wind is blowing at my face and going behind me. So everywhere that I have a visual field of view the wind is going to be going back, and they're not going to smell me unless they're behind me. And at that point, there's nothing I can really do, if they're walking 50, 100 yards behind me. If Jeff wants to chime in too, he may have some more.
Yeah, I would agree with that also, Mike. And, ironically, bow hunters spend great attention to trying to be scent free. The fact of the matter is, I don't care what you do. A deer's nose is incredible. And I can recall going through all the process of washing clothes in scent-free detergent, wearing rubber boots, using scent-free soap in the shower, spraying down before I go into the woods, and climbing up a tree in a climbing stand. And as the sun came up, having deer sniff and follow me directly to my tree. So I would encourage any hunter to be mindful of your scent and try to avoid perfumes or scented deodorants, scented shampoos, scented body wash, and even scent-free detergent for your clothes. But probably more importantly than that is using the wind and hunting the correct wind direction. And if you have a stand that the wind is just not right, in other words, the wind, and it will be blowing your scent into a bedding area or into an area where you would anticipate the deer to come from, then you may want to avoid hunting that stand because deer are pretty smart in that they're going to probably avoid that if they smell you. So I would encourage you to just be mindful of that. They have an incredible nose, and to try to minimize your scent and avoid things that have perfumes like your deodorant and shampoo, as well as your clothing, but also more importantly, try to utilize the wind direction to your benefit.
Thank you.
Hey, Michael, I got a question.
Sure.
All right, so I grew up hunting with my dad. He taught me, and I taught my sons, but I hadn't hunted for like 20 years. And so things have changed a whole lot as far as the regulations and stuff. I want to know if you could kind of point out some of those aspects. And this earn a buck thing, I can't really grasp that. I'm trying to figure that out.
Sure, yeah. We'll touch on a little bit of the law requirements here in a minute, so I'll get into that. But the Earn a Buck program, so that is county specific, which means that, like, I hunt in Montgomery County primarily, and we have Earn a Buck. So if I go out hunting and the first deer that I shoot, doesn't matter if it's a buck or a doe, but let's say that I go out and I'm able to harvest a buck right off the bat. So Earn a Buck basically says that before I can go and harvest another buck in Montgomery County, I have to go out and harvest a doe first. And so once I harvest that doe, then I can go back and harvest another buck in Montgomery County. However, if I harvest a buck in Montgomery County and then I go to Floyd County, I can go and harvest another buck in Floyd County and still be fine by the law. But then if I want to shoot another buck in Floyd County, I have to shoot a doe before shooting that other buck as well. Does that help clarify that for you?
Kind of. I mean, do you actually earn an extra tag or not?
No, so it doesn't earn you an extra tag. So you get 2 buck tags, and then I think it's 3 doe tags plus another tag for east of the Blue Ridge. And so you don't actually earn like another tag. You're just earning the right to be able to shoot another buck, if that makes sense. So the idea behind that is really a population management tactic. And so areas that have high deer populations, they use an Earn a Buck category to try to bring those populations down. So they're encouraging people to shoot more does instead of just going out shooting their 2 bucks and then quit hunting at that point. So really it's buck doe is how that process goes. So if you go out and you shoot a doe first, you can go shoot a buck. This is what it was explained to me from a CPO, and if anybody else has something different, but if you shoot a doe first, you can go out and shoot a buck and then another buck because you've already had that doe harvested there. But then at that point, you'd have to shoot another doe.
Okay, that clears it up a lot. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All right, so we'll get back here to our PowerPoint presentation now, and then I'll have some more time too as well that we'll get back into questions. So now we're going to get into the good nitty-gritty part of, getting started on the basics of hunting. So law requirements, the basic law requirements for you to be able to get out and go hunting is you have to purchase a hunting license. So there's a couple options that we have here. One is the basics is you have to purchase they call it a hunting license, but it's basically a small game hunting license, and then a deer and turkey hunting license, and that's really like your big game license that folks talk about. And then those will also come along with your tags that you'll get as well. To be able to actually purchase those licenses, you have to take the hunter safety course, which is anybody's required of 12 years of age or higher prior to hunting or purchasing a license. However, we do have a special license now that is called an apprentice license. The apprentice license says that anybody that can purchase an apprentice license, and you don't have to have the hunter safety course to actually go out and hunt. However, you do have to hunt with somebody who has had the hunter safety course and is a current license holder. So it's basically a mentor program that they're working on. So you can purchase that license without having hunter safety. If you really want to try out hunting, you do have to be escorted by somebody who's a license holder, has had the hunter safety course. If you take the hunter safety course, you can still hunt with an apprentice license for up to 2 years, and then you do not have to hunt with a person that it also is a license holder. So this license is a really good option for folks that are wanting to get out and try out hunting, but they don't want to fully commit financially to purchasing all the different licenses. Another one that is my personal favorite is called the Sportsman's License. It's about $100, and that covers you for deer, turkey, bear. It also does the actual license as well, and then it also covers freshwater fishing, your trout stamp license, and all those too. So if you're really looking to get out there and try everything and get your hands into that, I would say a Sportsman's License, a little more costly up front, but it'll cover you throughout the entire year for anything that you want to go through and hunt. And it's a really good license. That's personally what I buy every year. Does anybody have any questions on the licensing stuff before I move on?
If you buy the sportsman license, do you also have to buy the big game license?
No, that covers your big game license. So that gives you your deer and turkey license, and that also gives you your bear license, your muzzleloader, your archery, rifle, and then it also covers fishing portions too if you're looking to do that as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mike, do I have it right that you don't need a license if you're hunting on your own land? That's still true?
Yes, correct. So that is, and make sure you go and read the regulations to make sure that you qualify for that. And thank you for reminding me. I actually meant to mention that. If you're hunting on private land that you own or somebody that is in your direct family owns, as in like your father or your son or daughter or those, you do not have to have a hunting license to be able to hunt. However, you do still have to check your deer in when you harvest a deer. So if you harvest a deer on that private land where you not have to have a license, you still need to call that deer in and have it checked in just like everybody else would. And we really do that so that folks can, or that our biologists can keep track of our deer populations, and it helps give a more accurate number.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if your family, you said your family owns property, so does that count like as your sister owns it, or your like that family, or does it have to be like your mom and dad?
Jeff or Jason, can you help me out on that one? I can't remember without looking at
It-
the regulation.
Yeah, it's direct line. So grandfather, father, you cannot hunt your brother or sister's property without a license. So it's got to be the direct line. So grandfather or father.
Okay, so it has to be, sorry, it has to be mother, father, grandfather, down that way. It can't be like my sister and her.
That's
husband.
correct.
Okay.
You can't hunt your uncle's property without a license. It's got to be direct line.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, somebody else in here asked, does a NC Hunters course count for hunter safety course? Yes, if you've had hunter safety course in another state, it will also count in Virginia for your hunter safety course as well. You just have to be able to have your number and type that in when you go to purchase a license. Awesome. All right, so now we're going to get into where can I hunt. This is a big question that we always get from folks. They really are looking to get started hunting, but even seasoned folks too want to know more about places that they can hunt. So we have a ton of public land in Virginia, which is awesome. So we've got national forests, state parks. We call them WMAs, but they're wildlife management areas. There's a few national parks, federal refuges, military areas. There's quota hunts, which we'll get in a little more detail in a little bit. Public access, which is PALS program, power, and a lot of great things in the public land sector. Usually these require, I saw a couple questions on this, usually they do require some type of permit, paperwork, or other some special requirement. And I'll get into here in a minute. We'll walk through some of those websites, and I'll show you guys how to walk through those and figure out where to find those at. So private land is basically any land that's not owned by the government. So it could be your land, it could be family land, it could be your neighbor's land. One of the things with private land versus public land is private land, you're usually going to be a little more intimate because you're not going to have a bunch of other folks like you would in public land. However, not everybody has access to private lands. Later in the year, we're actually going to do a workshop on gaining access to hunting and help folks walk through how to gain private land access. Sometimes it'd be more beneficial, but I hunt both private and public land, and I very much enjoy both of them, and I've had a lot of good experiences on public land as well. So I would encourage folks to go out, and try out your public land first, and then try out, if you're having bad luck there, then maybe look into doing some private land as well. So we'll get into public lands now, and we have an app called Explore the Wild that'll help folks find that out. So that's put on from the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources. So the first thing I want to do is we have an app called Go Outdoors Virginia. If you go into your app store on your phone and just type in Go Outdoors Virginia, it'll pop up with the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources logo like you see on the screen. Hopefully everybody can see this, but so here's the application here. This actually holds all of your hunting and fishing licenses as well. It has all your hunting tags and a lot of good information, sunrise and sunset. So I encourage everybody to go out and download the app. However, if you're not familiar or don't like using applications, we also have a website link that you can use that gives you those same features. And so when you go into the Explore the Wild app, somebody asked earlier about finding areas around them to hunt in Fairfax. So this is a great avenue to do that at. And I actually, after the class is over, I have all the links that I'll use in this presentation, I'll email out to folks so that they can have those and find them as well. So once you're in the Explore the Wild app, we're talking about hunting today, so we'll say that we want to hunt. So you can click hunting, and then it gives you a list of the species that you actually want to hunt. So deer, bear, turkey, small game, etc. So we're talking about hunting deer, so I'll click on deer. And so I'm willing to drive 50 miles from my house, but you can go up to any distance, 10 miles, 25 miles or so. And you'll just type in your zip code. And then once you do that, it'll search a window within 50 miles of your radius for the areas that you can hunt deer at. And so it's going to give you a list of those. So right within 50 miles of me, there's the Radford Army Ammunition Plant. And it actually gives you how's the deer hunting that's rated by folks. So it talks about best bet, 3 stars, tells you the activities that you can do, amenities, and things like that. Claytor Lake State Park, again, gives you all those, gives you a rating. Fairy Stone, which is one of our WMAs, and all the different things here. So it's really good access to figure out exactly where you want to go hunt in the areas around you and what you can and can't do. Now, one of the things that I want to point out, and somebody asked about the National Forest Permit, is even though it does give you some of these, you'll have to do a little bit farther research. So like our Radford Army Ammunition Plant here is not an area that you can actually go out to on your own to go hunt. This is a managed hunt that's a quota hunt, which we'll get into in a little bit. And so you'll have to sign up for those and apply, and there's a little more few special regulations that go on with those. Oh, well.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Jason has his hand up.
Oh, sure. What you got?
I just wanted to add, I did an event a couple years ago, and we pulled hunting incidences for like the past 20 years, and it was like 5-1. A lot of people think that public land is not safe to hunt. And actually, here in Virginia, not that we have a lot of hunting incidences, but actually, public land is safer to hunt than private land. So, what I'm saying is there's less incidences that occur on public lands in Virginia than what it does in private lands. So, I just want to share that with people. You know, if you're kind of standoffish on hunting public land because you think it's unsafe, that's not the case.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a really good point to point out there. So we'll go through here. So let's say we're at Claytor Lake State Park. So this will take you directly to their website, and then you can start looking at if there's fees, prices, different things, and figuring out exactly what you can and can't do for hunting and fishing in these particular areas. I can tell you for Claytor Lake, it's another one that you have to sign up for. It's a quota hunt, which we'll get into here in a little bit more detail as well. But let's talk about like our WMA here, Ferrystone. So WMAs are great places to go out and hunt, especially if you're trying to find new areas. So right off the bat, it tells us, we got hunting, trapping that we can do, primitive camping, hiking, horsing, those things. It gives us a breakdown that says, you can scroll down to hunting, talks about 14,000 acres, sunny hunting opportunities, and on public land in Virginia. You can read a little bit farther into those. So it also has a link here talking about access permit requirements, which will give you those that if you own if you own a hunting license, you can access the WMAs without paying the extra fee. However, if you don't have a hunting license, then you have to pay the daily pass or the annual pass to be able to get on those. And then all of our WMAs, the regulations are all listed out in the typical regulation book. So you can go there to figure out exactly the regulations, but most of them follow your typical regulations that you have. Does anybody have any questions on this Explore the Wild app? Awesome. So I'll move on here too then. So the next link I'm going to show you here is another link that's put on by the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources that talks about public hunting lands. So similar to the Explore the Wild app, it gives you a list of places you can hunt. It doesn't give you as much detail within that radius of those. So the Explore the Wild app is great for that. However, what this does do is give you a simple breakdown of these different areas and anything that might require you for those. So if we look at, I'm interested in hunting a national forest, I can click on national forest, and it gives me contact information for phone numbers for folks in the rangers in those particular national forests. Also talks about day use fees are required on certain recreation areas. Please visit George Washington or Jefferson National Forest website, which will give you farther information into what those are. I always say it's a good idea too that if you've never been to one of those areas and want to find out more information, please call one of the numbers listed on here on the area that you want to go to, and those folks will be happy to talk to you, provide you with any information you may need, and help you walk through exactly what you need to do for your national forest to be able to go out and hunt those particular areas. But again, using this national forest example, if you go to their actual website, they'll have a section on here talking about passes that you can click on, maps that you can interact with, firewood cutting, any special regulations you need to find. So go through those, be able to read through them, make sure you fully understand what you can and can't do in those particular areas before you go out. And it's a good idea to always go through and do your research on those. Does anybody have any questions on those two links or how to find those or any farther access for that? All right, so talking about our quota hunts, like I mentioned before, there's a series of quota hunts that are provided throughout Virginia that gives hunters the opportunity to access public lands that you may otherwise be closed to hunting. So we talked about Claytor Lake State Park. We also talked about the Radford Army Ammunition Base. There's a few other ones around Virginia too. I know there's some in Northern Virginia and all over. So you can participate in these. There are random drawings. You can hunt various species like waterfowl, white-tailed deer, black bear, quail, rabbits, turkeys, and so forth. So to participate in these actual quota hunts, you must apply pre-season and submit a non-refundable application fee. But they're a lot of fun. I personally have done the Radford Arsenal one. I've helped work that and ferried hunters around. And it's a really good time, and it's good access to go through and see areas that you would otherwise not be able to see on a daily basis. So this link here will take you to our quota hunts page, and it'll give you a breakdown of how to actually access those, which ones are available to you, and how to walk through that. And so, like I said before, you have to apply pre-season. So you'll hit the apply to quota hunts. You'll have to already have your account logged in. And I'll show you this as well too. This is a good website to go through because this is where you're actually going to purchase your hunting and fishing license if you have not already done so. Alright, so here's a list of all the quota hunts that are available for those. So you've got Radford Army Ammunition Base. There's the elk hunt lottery application. So these are ones that I've actually applied for as well. If you're unfamiliar, Virginia has an elk herd now, and you can actually apply to hunt those every year. It's a yearly drawing. They give out 6 in total. They'll do 5 through a lottery drawing, and then the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has one that they also raffle off. So if that's something you're also interested in doing, you can apply for those. So applying for a quota hunt. So here's a list of all the available ones that you can apply for. So you can see on here right away, we've got Hog Island WMA, North Landing River, Princess Anne WMA down in Virginia Beach area, York River, Lands End WMA, and all of those are for whitetail deer. Then you also have multiple species that you can apply for, small game, spring turkey, waterfowl, and so forth on those. And so all of these you'll go in and you can click on, they give you the deadline. Some of these, the deadlines are tomorrow, so if you're interested in doing that, make sure you either do that tonight or tomorrow. You'll click on apply, fill out your information. There's usually a fee associated with those that you'll do, and then you'll get an email whether or not you were successful in drawing for those, and then it'll give you more details as well. A lot of these are really good to do, especially for first-time hunters, because you're actually, it's semi-guided as well. So you're not guided with a mentor, but like the Radford Army Ammunition Base, you'll go in, somebody checks you in, they'll set you up on a stand, and they'll come by and check on you, make sure you're okay, you're comfortable. If you have any medical issues, they'll be able to assist you. So if you're not real comfortable with going out by yourself the first time, and you want to try hunting by yourself, but not being out by yourself in the wilderness, these quota hunts are really good for that. Was that clear? Is there anybody has any questions on getting to those and applying to those? Cool. All right. So we're going to get into talking about equipment now. And so we're going to talk about the basic equipment that you'll need. So I'm actually going to switch back here to my camera off the presentation for a little bit and try to break up some death by PowerPoint here. So what I always like to tell folks, I know there's a question on here earlier about a 20 gauge shotgun. So the main thing you'll need to harvest an animal is going to be some type of way to harvest that animal, right? So you're going to need either a firearm or archery equipment if that's something that you want to venture into. And so the biggest suggestion that I tell folks just starting off is to get you some type of basic shotgun, whether it be a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge. And the reason being is, one, the shotguns are versatile, so you're not just for deer, but you can go out and shoot other species such as dove and turkey, deer, and a lot of other species. It comes with various different shell sizes and shot sizes, so you have buckshot, you have slugs that Paul had mentioned earlier. There's bird shot and different things. And so I always like to suggest to folks, one thing, it's to get a shotgun. One thing to consider is they make these in a 12 and a 20 gauge. So I would go out, and if you know somebody has them, try them both out. A 12 gauge is going to be stronger than a 20 gauge. And so if you are smaller in stature, maybe a 20 gauge is something that would be more comfortable for you. If you're a little bit bigger and can handle a 12 gauge, you might want to go with that. Also consider too what you want to hunt. 12 gauges are bigger. They have more kick to them and gunpowder to them, and so they're going to really, if it's a smaller species like a dove, a 12 gauge may not be like the best solution there because it has more kick to it, but it will be really good for deer and turkey. And so shotguns too are usually on the cheaper side. They can get really expensive, but most of your basic ones off the shelf are going to be on the cheaper side, so you don't have to invest a ton of money in there. Archery equipment, like you can see here behind me, you have your compound bows, your crossbows. There's traditional archery bows. Those are also two ways that you can harvest a deer. They take a little bit more time and practice to be able to master, and so I would suggest starting off with a firearm, like a shotgun in particular. However, if that's something that you want to jump into, there's nothing wrong with that, and please do that as well. But usually compound bows are custom set to you, so they go off of a draw length, your height, how big your wingspan is. And so when you go out to look at those, just make sure that you're selecting something that fits you. And there's a lot of great links and websites out there to talk about how to measure your wingspan in those. Crossbows are also another avenue that you can use. They're a little more like firing a firearm, but it's still an arrow. So they have a string and drawstring, but they generally have a trigger system so that you can cock them back and use a trigger and a sight to be able to shoot those as well. So if you're really wanting to do archery right off the bat, crossbow is something good to try. But with the compounds and the traditional archeries, I would also make sure you spend a good amount of time learning those and shooting those as well. Does anybody else, Jason, Jeff, Paul, you have any input on those?
We got some questions in the chat if you want to scroll down.
Oh, sure.
If for some of you folks that are maybe new to hunting and looking to purchase a firearm that's can be utilized for multiple types of game, my suggestion would be probably a 20 gauge shotgun, because a 20 gauge shotgun, you could hunt small game like rabbits and squirrels very effectively with it. You could also mount a scope on it and use a slug and be very effective for game up to the size of a whitetail deer as well. So if you're starting out, you don't have to go broke trying to purchase equipment. Certainly a 22 long rifle is an effective firearm for small game, but it's not lawful, and it's really not it's not lawful for large game like deer. But as well as considerations for how far trajectory a 22 bullet goes is something that you'll need to be mindful of and consider it from the safety aspect. So maybe just if you're new to hunting, like I said, don't have to go broke to start hunting. Maybe consider purchasing a firearm like a 20 gauge shotgun that is very versatile and can be used for different types of game.
Thanks, Jeff. Hey, Paul, do you mind reading some of those questions? For some reason, it's saying that I'm no longer a participant in the chat.
Yeah. So we got someone when you were talking about firearms, someone asked, they have a tactical 12 gauge and an AR-12. Are these appropriate?
Yeah, so the 12 gauge is appropriate. The AR platform, I would double check your caliber on that. I believe it's and I might need some help with this too, but I believe if it's a 223 platform, it is not legal. Is that correct, Jason, Jeff?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
For in a rifle caliber for big game, which is deer or bear, it must be 23 caliber or larger.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of AR platforms out there that are 223, so just make sure you check that caliber and see that it is that. But if it is a legal AR platform that's above that, they are great platforms for hunting deer. They're very accurate, and a lot of people have good success with those.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So with I've looked in the DWR handbook, I guess you could say, and it says stuff about 35 caliber or larger in PCP air rifles. Is that legal, or is that just something old?
So
Well, like you can deer with.
Yeah, so what it's referring to, there's a new technology, they call it an air rifle out there, but it is an air rifle, so it has an air chamber that you can fill up. Instead of using a traditional gunpowder, it uses air to shoot those projectiles. And so
Yes.
they just don't want people getting confused with, if you think of an air rifle, a lot of people think of like a pellet gun or something along those lines. And so that still is true that you can hunt with those air rifles. You just got to make sure that caliber is at that or higher than what it states as the minimum requirement.
So my next question is what's the stopping point? Like, I know they sell them. I own a few of them, but they have like up to 50 cal, and I don't know. They've got all different calibers. So what's the stopping point for a deer?
Stopping point is like caliber size?
Yeah. For that type animal. Like,
so really I would say, you can use anything up to a 50 caliber might be a little bit too large because you're going to have a lot of damage. So really what you need to consider is the meat loss aspect of that. So you're aiming for a heart and lung shot, but if you have a larger caliber bullet that has a lot of force behind it, you run into the potential of damaging the meat around it. So your shoulder blades, the rib meat, even backed into the back strap, depending on where that shot is. So I typically, I'm not familiar with the air rifle, so I apologize there. A 50 caliber, in my opinion, might be a little bit too large for that, so I would use something smaller.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Alrighty.
Does that help answer that?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Someone else asked, is a 6.5 Creedmoor okay for deer?
Yeah, so 6.5 Creedmoor is a good caliber for deer. One thing that I'll also suggest too is that I hunted with a 270 for a long time, which is a very similar caliber to a 6.5 Creedmoor. One of the things I did notice that if it was anything within 100 yards, because of the amount of force that puts out, I did start seeing quite a bit of damage in those areas like I was just mentioning. And so I was getting some meat loss in the front shoulder if I was too far front. And then if I was a little bit farther back, I was noticing too that it was actually blowing out the diaphragm and creating a mess on the inside of the deer there when you had to go and field dress it. So nothing wrong with a 6.5 Creedmoor. That's just my personal opinion, but they are great calibers for deer. They're extremely accurate and they fly very fast and flat too. So great for long range too. All right, so we'll get back into a little more equipment. So we've talked about our firearms and our archery there. So one of the other basic requirements that you'll need is some type of clothing. So just consider when you're thinking about clothing, you're just starting off. You don't need to go out and buy like a very expensive and fancy gear to get started. Really, I would say focus on color. So deer can see blues very well with their eyesight. So I would steer clear of blues, but if all you have is a pair of blue jeans and maybe a camo shirt, or maybe not even a camo shirt, that also works perfectly well. One of the things I always like to tell folks is deer respond more to movement than they really do anything else. And so even if you are wearing blue or like blue jeans or something of that aspect, just be mindful of your motion. So if you're out there sitting completely still, they might look at you and be like, "Oh, what is that? That's something weird I've never seen before." But as long as you're not making a bunch of motion, they'll probably go back to eating or something like that. So when you're talking about clothing as well, also consider the time of year, the temperature, the wind, if it's raining or that as well. One of the biggest things that deters people from staying out in the woods hunting is just being uncomfortable. And so if it's going to be cold out, make sure you're wearing lots of layers, especially if it's windy too. Layers are always great, especially in the wintertime. I'm a hot natured person, so I actually like to keep a jacket or bib, something in my backpack, and I'll walk out wearing the most minimum thing I can, and I'll walk to that stands, and then I'll cool down for a second, and then I'll start putting on that gear too. So layers are a really good idea for when you're out hunting. But once again, all you really need at a minimum is, something that makes you comfortable. So, just consider rain, winds, weather, of those things in nature. The other thing, too, that, you always need at a basic level is some type of knife. One of the suggestions I like to make, you don't need a fixed blade knife like this is. You can use a pocket knife is just fine. But this one's particularly made for skinning. It has a nice curved edge to it. But you don't, again, need anything super fancy in the knife department, just something that is going to work for what you need to do. So some of the things you'll got to consider is you're going to need to field dress your deer, and we'll go over this a little bit more in detail as well. So just something appropriate for those. I like these particular type of knives because it has this, what they call a gut hook on here. And so these are really good for skinning certain parts of the animal, but they also are very good for helping you get the animal open to be able to field dress it as well. But with this particular knife you have here, if this was the only knife I had, I could go through and field dress that animal and quarter it out just fine with just this knife. There's some other ones we'll talk about in a little bit when we get into processing. They're a little more specialized for those things, but a knife is always a good thing to have too. And then one of the other things too is a backpack to carry everything in. So I like to carry a backpack to put my knives in, flashlights, gloves, my layers, any of those things. And so at a minimum, some type of equipment to harvest a deer. So, firearm, archery equipment, a knife, comfortable clothing depending on the weather. And then anything else that, is going to help you get comfortable, like hot hands or any of those things. Does anybody have any question on the basics of that equipment?
About binoculars, you take binoculars with you?
Personally, I do. Yeah, I like using binoculars. You don't really need binoculars to go out and hunt for your first time, but I think they are a great thing to have. For me particularly, because you can see way farther off distances, and you can actually see. It's not really a good description; it's more detail. But if you're looking at a section of woods and it's a thick cover, brushy area, with your naked eye, you're going to see all the sticks, but you really can't see in between those different slots. And so with binoculars, it helps you focus in between those. So there's been times with binoculars that I've been out and I've actually been able to spot just the ear or just the leg of a deer that's sitting behind a tree that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to see with my naked eye.
Rangefinder.
So rangefinders are good, especially if you're wanting to get into archery hunting. They are good at being able to determine your distance. So most people try to steer clear of shooting anything with archery above 40 yards. But again, with a rifle or a firearm, if you're just getting started out, rangefinders are a great idea to have because it helps you determine, until you become better at knowing those yardages just off the top of your head, it can help you determine what your maximum shooting range is to be effective but also not wound animals. But you don't necessarily need to have them as well if you're good with yardages and knowing that, where 100 yards is might be your limit with a particular type of firearm if you can determine where that is.
You should probably also have a compass and a map if you're unfamiliar with that property you're on.
Yeah, that's a great input. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll get into a little bit here too. There's applications out there that you can use to help you with those. But a lot of places you're going to go hunt, especially the WMAs and National Forest, you may or may not have service in those particular areas. So it's always good to have a map and a compass, and I'll also throw in there too a first aid kit. So it's always good to have that on you as well. Any other questions on the basics equipment? Great. All right. So one of the other things to consider is a plan for getting your deer out. So let's say you got all your equipment down, you figured out where you want to hunt, you've made it out there, and you were able to successfully harvest a deer. So these are a couple things that you need to consider in this process to help those as well. So the first thing is you're going to have to field dress that animal, which is the removal of the organs and the gastrointestinal tract. I will also send you a link on a video that's a really good video about how to field dress a deer. After we get through this class, I'll email that out to everybody. But that's something that you need to consider and think about is one of the things a lot of folks tell us in these classes, like, well, I've gotten a deer, so what do I do with it now? So just be aware of that. Do a little bit of research, watch videos, ask friends, families. You're welcome to ask us as well. We also will have, here in the future, there's going to be a couple deer processing workshops and hunting workshops, which we'll talk about more in detail here in a little bit as well, which will help kind of get you through that in-person section of that. But just be mindful that is something that you will have to do. And that is really, it's a good thing because it's going to end up spoiling your meat if you leave those in there. And just for meat preparation, it's always a good practice to get those out as soon as possible. You want to start cooling that meat down as soon as you can. And so removing the guts and gastrointestinal tract out of there is going to help open that cavity up and get air in there. And especially if you've had a shot a little bit farther back than you're hoping to, and you expose some of those guts, you want to make sure to get those out as fast as possible. Something else to consider taking out with you would be a rope. So if you're planning on having to drag the deer out yourself, a rope is always a good idea. There's a lot of great videos out there on YouTube too about how to successfully drag deer out, whether they have antlers or not antlers, and how to do this so that you can help yourself out. Deer can get pretty heavy, so you need to consider having something to aid you to where you're not having to drag all that weight by yourself. They also there's a lot of companies that make what they call sleds. So instead of dragging a deer along the ground with using a rope, you can actually set it inside a sled. A lot of them honestly look like your traditional sled that you would have when you go out sledding when it snows. But they're also great to help you aid in dragging those out, and it helps keep your deer clean too. Keeps it up off the ground, keeps dirt and leaves and stuff from getting inside the cavity to create more work as well. If you're on private land and you have access, maybe your family members have an ATV, a side-by-side, a truck, etc., you need to have some type of plan to know, where is that going to be stationed at, who can actually drive that, who's going to come out and get that, and which routes you can take to keep yourself safe and others safe as well. And then another option too that's a little more involved is to pack it out. So once you get more comfortable with field dressing, quartering, and processing deer, this may be a good option as well if you don't have any other options. Is you can get you a nice backpack with a frame on it. You can skin it, field dress it, everything right there, and then stick it in meat bags and be able to pack that out and walk it out on your back as well. Does anybody have any questions or input on the getting your deer out? I missed that. Somebody had a question there?
I have one question.
Sure.
Have you ever used the butt out plug, or thoughts on it?
I have actually, so I use it now quite a bit. So what there's referring to is there's a tool that you can have. So one of the things that you have to deal with when field dressing a deer is you have to remove that gastrointestinal tract, which includes the anus. And so in the video, if you go to watch it, you'll see they'll actually make an incision around that anus, and then you have to pull that section of the intestines out. So the tool he's referring to is to help aid in that. So you can actually stick that into the anus. It has a little bit of hooks on it. It's got a guide around it that you can cut the circle in, and then you can pull that out rather than through the cavity. You can pull it out backwards, tie a knot off on the intestines, and then create that incision and then be able to pull it out. So it makes a little bit of a cleaner process. So I've used them quite a bit in the last few years, and I really enjoy them. So one of the things we always suggest with folks is, you've got your deer, you field dressed it, you figured out how to get it out of the woods. So now how do you turn that deer from an animal into something that you can eat and ingest as well? So if you're just starting out hunting and you've never hunted before, we always like to suggest folks that to find a processor in your area that can do that work for you for your first deer. That way you can get your meat back, you can start learning how to cook it and figuring it out, and it doesn't become a cumbersome thing to go through. So a couple of things to consider when you're starting to look for processors is be aware of CWD regulations. This is chronic wasting disease that we had mentioned earlier. Because of the chronic wasting disease in certain areas and counties, there's certain regulations about transporting deer in and out of those counties. So you can find those in our hunting regulation on the website or in the actual book themselves. So just make sure you go through those depending on what county you hunt in and understand those. Some of those are going to require you to have to bone out or quarter out the deer before you take it to a processor. I know that's a lot to ask of folks that are hunting for the first time and doing that, but unfortunately that's what's going to keep us from spreading CWD around to certain counties as well. So just make sure you're mindful of those and you understand those processes before you go to those processors as well.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
What was the name of that tool that you just mentioned?
It's called a butt out.
Could you? Well, I guess you're not in chat. How do you spell that?
Just BUTT-OUT.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next thing too is to call the processors you're planning to go to and see if they have any requirements. Some processors, I know one of the ones that we have locally, prefer people to have their deer skinned out. Some of them go as far as saying they want it skinned out and they don't want any hair on the meat, or they'll charge you an extra fee. There might be some other requirements that goes along with those too, so make sure you just check with the processor you're planning on going to and seeing what kind of requirements they have. Always a good idea too to call ahead, especially during the peak of hunting season. Some of these processors are getting 200 deer a day, so it's always good to call ahead and say, hey, I've harvested a deer, do y'all have availability, are you still taking deer, what's your turnaround time, and just understand that too, because if they have a lot going on, it might be better off to go to the next processor down the line who has a little bit more availability. One thing too is it's always good to check prices ahead of time. Everybody has different prices, and just to make sure you understand what that involves so you're not getting surprised at the end. A lot of them will do just, there's a standard fee if you just want a standard processed deer. It's anywhere from $80 to $100 or a little bit more. However, a lot of them will do if you want like specialized things like summer sausage, bratwurst, they'll charge extra by the pound. So just make sure you go through those and understand those prices ahead of time before you get there so you're not surprised of what's going on. Again, this is another link that I'll send y'all, but if you're unfamiliar, there's a program in Virginia called Hunters for the Hungry. So you can donate meat to this program and then it'll go through it to help feed homeless folks and folks in need. And so if you harvest more than you can handle, or you just want to go out and harvest a deer to help this program out, it's a great thing to do. But one thing they do provide is they provide a list of processors for you to look at as well. And all of them participate in their program, but it also helps with if you're looking around and searching for program or processors, they provide a nice list here by county on different processors as well. You can also do a quick Google search and that will work as well too, but if you wanted to look at these, I'll also send you this link and it'll tell you their name, address, phone number, and different things as well. Does anybody have any questions on processors? Great. All right. So getting into processing equipment now. So if you decide that you want to do it yourself method, which is great, I process all of my own deer meat. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy doing. And it helps me kind of have that nice feeling of start to finish. So one of the things I very much enjoy about hunting is, one, I love hunting from a conservation standpoint, wildlife, but it also is a really good feeling when you're able to go out, you're able to harvest your own animal, your own food. You do the whole process from start to finish, and then you're able to cook a nice meal with it to feed to your family and friends, and that's a good feeling to go all the way through. So if you want to try to do this yourself, maybe down the road, or you want to jump right in and figure it out, there's a couple things to consider here too to help you out. One of those is, we talked about earlier, the knives. So there's specialized knives. Again, you don't need all these knives, but just something to think about. With boning knives, fillet knives, choppers, it's going to help you process those different cuts of those animals as well. It's always a good idea to wear protective gloves. Again, we talked about disease management. different things that can be spread through spinal column and things. One thing I would like to note is we touched on chronic wasting disease, but I would like to say that as far as we know right now, there has been no transfer of chronic wasting disease to humans. But it's always a good idea to make sure that you protect yourself in the instance that does. And that's not just chronic wasting disease, but any pathogen that can go through an animal. So, ticks, different things like that. One thing also, too, that you'll need to consider is where are you going to put the meat once you process it out? Is it, do you have a cooler that you can use to help cool and chill your meat down? Is it a refrigerator that you're going to use? Do you have freezer space, freezer availability? Those things, too. A lot of folks like to age their meat. And so there's a couple methods here, and everybody has varying opinions on those, but you can use a cooler method, which is where you process it out, you stick it in a cooler with ice, make sure that the water is drained out. You don't really want the meat sitting in water, and you'll leave it in there for a week and keep refreshing that ice, and that helps break down those proteins and enzymes to make the meat a little more tender as well. You can do the same thing with the refrigerator to help that go through, and then once you process all your cuts, you're going to want to freeze it for long-term storage. So just make sure you consider, what are you going to do with your cuts, how are you going to store it, are you going to age it, and do you have that space availability? Something else is a clean space or hanging equipment. Like you can see in this picture here, you can build something with a hanger out of wood, 2x4s, something to hang it up to where you can work the animal and be able to do that without having it laying all over the ground. If you don't want to do a hanger method, you can use a table or something, but just make sure you have a clean space to do that with so you're not contaminating your meat with other pathogens, you're not getting leaves, dirt, and stuff in those as well. Disinfecting supplies, again, so if you're using a table, your knives and things like that, it's always a good practice to disinfect those as much as possible. Make sure you have those, water and paper towels. One of the biggest turnoffs some people get is when you're skinning it out, you can get hair on the meat, and some people just really don't like that. So just make sure that you have something to wipe the hair off, wash your meat out, get as much of that blood out as possible as those. Once again, for proper storage of going through long term, make sure think about freezer paper, vacuum sealers, freezer. That's supposed to say tape. I misspelled that, but freezer tape as well, something to wrap that meat up with so you can store it and it's not getting freezer burned, and something to keep that with so store it for a long time. And then a Sharpie is always good to label your meat. A lot of people like to put the date on it. Deer meat in the freezer can last for a very long time. It's not really going to go bad for, I would say up to 2 to 3 years in that freezer. It can go longer than that. It just depends on what your opinions are. But another good thing for a Sharpie is, especially if you're in a county that has chronic wasting disease, there's voluntary testing that you can get tested for chronic wasting disease. You can turn that in, and it's always good to label your meat with the number that you get back from that testing. And so that way you can store it, and once you get your results back, then you know what you can do with it. So let's say your results come back positive and it says, hey, this deer has chronic wasting disease. It's up to you at that point to what you want to do, whether you want to continue to eat that or continue or not eat it. And so labeling it with that number helps you understand, like, hey, I don't really am comfortable with eating that, so I'm going to toss out this meat and keep it separated from those. All right, so continuing on with the meat processing for yourself here. Just a couple more things to consider and good practices as well. Wear gloves when handling deer carcasses, like we mentioned. Avoid cutting through the bone, brain, lymph nodes, and spinal column. Again, this is especially true with chronic wasting disease, but in general, most of your wildlife-borne diseases are going to congregate inside the lymph nodes or inside the spinal cord fluid or spinal fluid into the brain and those things too. So avoid cutting through those if you possibly can. Sometimes it is unavoidable, and so you just do the best that you can. Bone out your muscles along the backbone to avoid cutting the spinal column. Avoid cutting through the lymph nodes and remove the meat when found. If the spinal cord must be severed, again, we talk about sometimes it's unavoidable. Use a blade or a knife dedicated solely for that purpose, and then make sure you clean and sanitize that as well. And do not use that same blade or knife to cut your muscle sections as well. Understand, just getting started off, you may not be able to recognize what brains and lymph nodes and things are too. So I would highly suggest, asking somebody that you may know, watching YouTube videos, and learning the anatomies of these deer as well. Do anybody want to take a break, or do we want to keep rolling?
Keep rolling.
All right. Cool. So we're talking about, we're going to get into our mentor workshops and clinics. So kind of, you've gone through this virtual course now, which we've talked a lot about the basics of huntings, things to consider with equipment, clothing, and those. So what really is your next step in this process? Maybe you want to go out and you want to jump right into it and you want to figure it out on your own. I understand and respect that. My personality is I like really getting into things and learning things for myself. However, mentor workshops and clinics are a great avenue as well. We really enjoy doing them, and they help a lot of folks out. And so these are in-person workshops or clinics that you can come to. We have a few in our area coming up, and Jason can mention a few in his area as well. But these are really going to get you hands-on. They're going to have folks that mentor hunt programs, be able to get that hands-on experience with somebody with you to be able to teach you through those. So just like you sign up for this course, you'll go to that same registered.com area. And again, I'll send you this link in an email after we're done. These are the Department of Wildlife Resources programs that they offer. We're also going to have some partnered workshops coming up with the NDA side of this as well. But for their instance, you can go here. It has different boating, outdoor learning, and all the things, your hunter safety courses. But if you scroll down here to our Virginia Hunter Education and Outreach Workshops, this will list out all of the events that we have. And so a lot of you probably have seen this already when you register for this course through this website. But I'll show you a few of these as well. So you'll walk through these. Any of these say deer hunting skills is going to be either some type of workshop. It may be a deer processing workshop. It might be an actual hunt. So just make sure that you click on those individual links and read exactly what that's going to be. So like this one, for example, is our Matthews State Forest hunt that's going to be coming up here in September. And so you'll learn the basic hunting skills. This will be an in-person class. It's for youth hunters from 13 to 15 or any apprentice license holding folks who are 16 years or older. So like we mentioned earlier, anybody at any age that has never bought a hunting license before can get that apprentice license, and you would qualify for this workshop. So it's a deer hunting workshop where we'll talk about deer biology, habitat, scouting, hunting techniques, game laws, more in-depth information that we have here in this course. But then a small number of folks will actually get to go on a mentored hunt at Matthews State Forest. So this is another option, kind of that next step for folks to go through. There's another one that we'll be holding in our area in November that's going to be geared towards non-youth folks, so it'll fall outside of the youth program. There's going to be another workshop as well. Jason, do you have any coming up in your area? Or any workshops you'd like to mention?
We've got a lot of things going on in Region 4. One thing that we're doing is one of my volunteers, Bob Walls, has a Get Started Hunting series. It's a series of virtual classes very similar to this. Each virtual class has its own topic, diving in depth into a lot of the things that you all are talking about this evening. That's something that some of the students might be interested in. I've got a mentored deer hunt coming up in Stafford County this December. I'm still looking for a few participants for that. We have upland game bird hunts coming up. We've got small game squirrel hunting workshops coming up. All kinds of clinics, tree stand safety, you name it. It's coming this fall and winter.
Awesome. Is there any other? I know we had a few other instructors from other areas. Is there any other instructors on that would like to mention any of their stuff in their particular regions?
I would, but Jason just said it all.
Awesome. Yeah. So keep a lookout for those. Keep visiting back on this website. Like Jason said, they're offering more than just deer. If you're interested in trying out other things, there's quite a bit of these as well that you can go through and look. So that's our workshops and clinics coming up that you can go through this link as well. One of the things I mentioned earlier is we talked about that mentor program. We had that question about how that worked, but I'll go over that again as well. So some of you should have received an email already to register. Unfortunately, there is a deadline that is this past Sunday, so if you registered for the course after that, you probably did not receive that email. So the deadline's closed for the year, but it's going to reopen next year. So Paul put a link in the chat there, but I'll also include it in those links that I'll email out. So you can check that out. And as I mentioned earlier, that's a more intimate experience that's put on by the Department of Wildlife Resources. So you'll get linked with a person, hopefully located in your area, and you can go out on a one-on-one basis with them as well. All right, so one of the things I wanted to show folks is, and actually for joining our class today, I have a link that I'll send you in that email that's going to give you guys 3 months free of Elite, the Elite membership of Onyx Hunt. And so this app, what it is an app for really good for scouting, e-scouting, and figuring out the areas that you can and can't hunt. One of the things that I really like to use it for is our public land hunts, and there's other applications as well, like Hunt Stand. Some like prefer Hunt Stands, and there's various ones out there too. But it allows you to drop waypoints, save locations, and things as well. But the biggest feature that I like about this, especially for our public land areas, is it shows property boundaries, and so you can be very aware of where you are and are not. And one of the reasons I say that is this is our Jefferson National Forest here, and one thing that I like to show folks is right in the middle of the National Forest here, there's a section, and once it loads here, you'll see there's a section that's actually private property. And so if you're unaware of where that may be, you might be crossing through somebody's private property. So it's a really good idea to understand where those property lines are. Somebody mentioned having a physical map with you. Again, if you're in an area, most of these will work, and you can save a map offline, but it's always a good idea to have that map too. But this is good to start learning your actual areas, saving waypoints, and knowing where those private properties are too. It has a lot of other features that are really good. I won't go through a lot of them today just for time's sakes. However, like I said before, you'll get a link in that email after this course that'll offer you 3 months free for doing this workshop with us, or virtual course with us, to go through and tinker through that and see how you like it. But also, you can use that to start understanding exactly where and where you don't want to hunt as well. All right, so is there questions at this point? I want to open it up. Give us a good amount of time to have any questions, anything else you want to go more in detail or depth about.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
We had a question earlier about specific regs and just some confusion with it in Prince William. And so I was thinking maybe after everybody asks questions, if we want to walk through the website for like one county and just kind of like talk through, find out the regs for the rifle season, like bow season, just to, piece together how to actually find that info, because it can be kind of confusing.
Sure, yeah, no problem.
But yeah, we can do that at the end.
I have a question, Mike.
Yeah.
So I did sign up for the mentorship program. I did it last year actually, and was hooked up with a guy, but he ended up getting sick. I went on one hunt last year.
Yeah.
But I went with a hunt club, and I didn't even see a deer, which is rare. And I got home and saw 2 in my yard. Anyway. So I signed up this year again. So does that mean like someone will contact me, or do I need to reach out to somebody?
No. So if you signed up this year, you should get some type of email sent to you or something to notify you that you're going to be paired with somebody. The registration just closed this past Sunday, so they might still be working on figuring out those linking and pairings. But I will also reach out to that person and see exactly when they're going to be sending those out.
Okay, appreciate it, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody else have any questions right now, or do we want to jump into some more of the specific regulations? let me pull these up here, and we'll start walking through some of these to help you all better understand those.
Yeah, so they were asking specifically about Prince William and like bow season versus rifle season, and like how to differentiate, you know, what certain counties you're in, what regs fall under that county.
Sure. So I would say the easiest thing to do would be to so this is the website version of it. It's also on your, you can find it on your app on your phone if you download the Go Outdoors VA app. But these website links will take you to general hunting regulations. However, you can also download the PDF version of the actual physical hunting regulation book. And so one of the things I'll point out here based on that question is in these reg books, there's a section. Give me a second here, let this finish. Oh, maybe. All right, there we go. What I was saying before is why this is finishing doing its thing. There's a section in here that breaks down specific county requirements. So there's state requirements that are true for the entire state. However, the county that you live in or hunt in may have farther regulations within those counties. And so I'll show you all where those are located and how to navigate those as well. And if you don't know, as you're unaware too, you can access all this information online as well. But generally, at any Walmart, any hunting and fishing store in your area, sometimes gas stations as well will carry these physical regulation books. So you can swing in there and pick one of these up as well. Once again, I'll touch here. So we were talking about the licenses earlier. So you can see here on the screen the different costs of your particular license here. So we talked about the Sportsman being $100. You have your resident hunting license, 1 year license, $23. Your bear, turkey, or your deer and turkey one, again, not required for holders of resident services, connected disabilities, veterans. It lists out all of that information. If you're buying all these individually, deer, turkey license, $23. If you want to do archery, it's $18 on top of that, and various different things as well. Somebody had a question earlier about air guns. Those as well. You can find those on here as well. But let's get down to our counties here. Talking about different calibers earlier, real quick again. Talking about air calibers. They were referencing those questions. This section here walks through the different caliber minimum sizes, exactly what you can and can't use as far as shotguns, air guns, rifles, archery on the different particular species as well. Okay, so here's our county ones here. Let me see if I can. So on this particular page, you'll see all the different counties listed out that have some type of special requirements. So we were talking about, it was Prince William, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So Prince William County here, you can see listed out, they've got a 2, a 12, and a 20. And what that means is if you scroll down here, the numbers will coincide on what their actual special requirements are. So in Prince William County, they're going to follow all of the state requirements listed in these regulations. However, they also have special requirements. So if we look at 2, it says no rifles larger than a 22 for hunting. And then it also states, Prince William's a 12. It is unlawful to use a muzzleloader rifle for game animals in the regular season. And then 20 also states that it shall be unlawful to discharge or shoot any firearm or any other weapon enter along a public road, street within 100 yards, therefore of 100 yards of building occupied. So what this generally means is Prince William County, more than likely, you're not going to be able to hunt with a rifle, and they probably have an urban archery program. I don't know if is anybody, Jason or Jeff or anybody familiar with Prince Williams?
I'm sorry, I was writing in the chat. What's the question?
They were asking about hunting in Prince William with special regulations. So the regulations for Prince William talk about no hunting, no rifles larger than a .22. You can't use a muzzleloader. It is lawful to use a muzzleloader rifle during games in regular hunting season, and it's unlawful to discharge shoot within 100 yards of those. So the question is, Prince William, if I understand correctly, it's a pretty populated area, so more than likely they have an urban archery program. So you'd follow the normal state regulations, but then you'd also just make sure that these general requirements in the county here.
Yeah, Mike. We'd have to look at the specific game that person's interested in. Because Prince William is up there in the Quantico area. It just depends on where they're going to be hunting, and look at the specific game, and then that would guide them and point them in the right direction.
Okay.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
I think it'd be helpful too if you just like pretend you're about to hunt deer in Prince William and go to like the season.
Sure.
Go to the seasons and just kind of say you're hunting for something and just walk through that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Go to page 40 where that map is, so they know how to use that map, and just so that they understand different parts of the state have different seasons according to the county that you're in. So it's just something that people will need to be mindful of where they're hunting, and go and look at this map, and then go look at that color coordinated county that they plan to hunt and see when that season comes in. And then also, like you already did, go and reference that county under the county ordinances to see if there's any further regulations outside of just this general information.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good idea. So what they're referring to here is on this page, you can see this is our map of Virginia and all the different counties and the color coded when those seasons are. So we've been talking about hunting deer, so we'll use deer as our example. So here in Prince William County, which you can see right here. So the first thing we notice is we have this triangle and this diamond that's a red and orange diamond. So if we come over here, so the first thing we look at is, all right, we've got a black diamond here, which means that we have an early and late antlerless only firearms deer season. So what that means is we'll go to page 41 here in a second. But that means that those folks in those counties have an extended season that they can actually hunt in. And then it's also got that red triangle, so that means that they have that Ernebuck. So if we remember from earlier, we had the person ask about the Ernebuck program, so that means that applies for that county. And once again, that means that before you can harvest a second buck, you have to be able to shoot a doe before you can harvest that second buck. So you can harvest a buck, but before you do a second one, you have to be able to shoot a doe.
Can I quickly ask about the early-late firearm season? Because I found that very confusing trying to read that. I'm in Shenandoah County, and by reading that, correct? Yes, thank you. Sure. By reading of that, the early and late firearm season only applies to private land. Is that correct, or am I misreading it?
Yeah, we'll get down there. I'll scroll down to that early and late antler season, and we'll go over that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So make sure you know which county you're hunting in. Look at the color that county represents. If there's anything here, we'll make sure we hit those on the way as we go down. So using Prince William again here real quick, or Shenandoah as well, that's blue. So we'll scroll down to our color here. All right, so and just to double check, because sometimes these colors can get confusing, they list out all the counties as well. So we'll go through here and say, okay, we've got Prince William right here, so we know we're in Prince William County. So what this means is that our firearm season for Prince William County, which is also referred to quite a bit as General Firearms, runs from November 16th to January 4th. So our regular season starts on November 16th and it runs through January 4th. And then they list out here that, if there's any special ordinances, see the page that we were just on, which we'll go back to as well to make sure you check your local ordinances. And then Shenandoah is our dark blue color. Must have passed it. So Shenandoah, again, the dates here for your general firearms or firearm seasons, November 16th through the 30th. So that's our regular season. They also have either sex deer hunting days, which means that in areas otherwise noted below, November 23rd and 29th and 30th on National Forest and Department-owned lands in Craig County. So in those particular dates, you fall under that either sex days. This is basically saying in Shenandoah County, you can hunt either sex November 16th through the 30th. Then on National Forests, Department-owned lands, Craig and Wythe County and Giles County, either sex applies November 23rd to 29th and the 30th. But outside of those dates, it would not. It would revert back to the antlerless season, which I can show you where to find that in a minute. Cool. And so if you scroll down past your colors of your county here, it gets into our early and late antlerless only firearm deer season. And so during these seasons, only antlerless deer may apply or may be taken. An antlerless deer is considered anything that does not have antler protruding past its skin, which there's a section here I'll show you a picture as well. So a button buck that does not have an antler protruding past its skin is considered an antlerless deer. If it has an antler that's poking out through the skin, even if it's the tiniest little antler, it's considered an antler deer. And so during these early and late firearm seasons, you can only shoot antlerless deer. So if we remember back to our thing, we had a black diamond on there. And so we can check our county again and make sure we go through. We've got Shenandoah, Prince William County listed on here. So what this means is starting on September 7th this year through October 4th, and then again on January 5th to March 30th, you can legally hunt antlerless deer during that time. So your extended season, which they call an early and a late, your early time is September 7th through October 4th. In most counties, archery starts in that October 4th time frame, and that they don't have the early season, you cannot hunt before then. However, in early and late seasons, it is general firearms. So if you look down here, it says all legal deer hunting weapons, including bows, crossbows, muzzleloaders, pistols, shotguns, rifles, are legal. So it's a general firearms season from September 7th to October 4th. Then after the regular season ends, you have from January 5th to March 30th, which then goes back to a general firearms season. So you can use any of the legal weapons listed on here, or firearms, to be able to harvest those animals.
But that's, just to be clear, that's on those districts of counties that are on the western counties there, Bush the Blues, that's only on private land, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So if
Michael, I had a question.
If you're like myself and you're going to be limited to public land this year, presumably you really have those 2 weeks, basically, or whatever, according to your color-coded map, whatever county you're in, you have that main season basically on public land.
Yeah, so you'll have in those areas, in those counties that fall under those public lands, it would fall under the regular season unless it's otherwise listed. So like on Shenandoah, for example, your public land areas, it falls under this season, except for if it's listed out in particular days like it has here. So either sex days only applies on National Forest and Department-owned lands in Craig, Wythe counties, National Forest lands, and Giles. So you'll have to really make sure you read through those and see. So if it doesn't list out a county like it does here with Craig or Wythe or Giles, it reverts back to the typical season of whatever this says. Yeah. Do you have any, Jeff, do you have any input on that? I know you have quite a bit of knowledge on regulations.
I'm sorry, I was typing in the chat again. Say again the question.
We were just asking about specific regulations on whether or not it's public or private lands with like either sex days in specific counties. So they were asking about Shenandoah and had a little bit of confusion of, you know, when they can and can't hunt on public lands, but also that early and late season that applies that's only on private lands.
Jason could probably address that one a little better. He's from that specific area.
Okay.
My suggestion is really try and do your best to read that. And when you do have specific questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out to your local conservation police officer. And again, I'm in the southwest part of the state, so I'm not as familiar with some of those seasons and regulations in the valley or in the Tidewater area. So I would strongly encourage you, take the time and read the digest, look at it in the Go Outdoors app, or you can look at a PDF version from our website, or get a hard copy. I'm old school, so get a hard copy and read one. You can pick one up at Walmart or any of our local department offices for free. And if you do have questions before the season, I would encourage you, go ahead and reach out to your local CPO. You can do that simply by calling your local sheriff's department, or if you live in a city, call your local police department and have them. You can leave your name and a contact information, phone number, and email address, and have a CPO, conservation police officer, to call you back. And then you can ask any questions and get the pertinent information for that specific area.
What was the question again, Mike, about Shenandoah?
I'll see if the person can ask again to make sure I was understanding it too.
Sure thing. So if you are, as I am this year, at least restricted to public land, that means I basically have those 2 weeks, November 16th through November 30th, and that's it. Is that correct?
So Shenandoah County, you know, these regs can be very intimidating to new hunters. And sometimes you got to read them a couple times to understand it. And just like Jeff said, you can reach out to one of your conservation police officers. But if we look at Shenandoah, it's November 16th through November 30th. Mm. And it says in the counties included, and Shenandoah County is included in there, and it says either sex deer hunting days, November 16th through November 30th, full season in all areas unless otherwise noted below. So if we look below, it says November 23rd and November 29th and 30th on National Forest and Department-owned lands in Craig, Wythe counties, and National Forest lands in Giles. November 23rd and 30th on private lands west of Route 613, 731, Rockingham County, which that's not Shenandoah. And then November 30th on National Forest Department-owned lands in Augusta, Botetourt, Smith counties, National Forest lands, Grayson, Shenandoah. So in Shenandoah County, deer hunting season is November 16th through the 30th. On public lands, the only either sex day you have is November 30th. So if you're hunting public land, the only day you can harvest a doe is on November 30th. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, so I was going to jump in too because I understood a little better the second time you asked it. So for your general firearm season, you only do have those 2 weeks. So
okay.
Are you only hunting in the general firearm season, or are you doing like archery, muzzleloader, and those as well?
Yeah, just general.
Yeah, so unfortunately, in the general firearm season, it's only within those 2 weeks. However, there's also, if you wanted to get a longer hunting time frame in those, maybe look into doing some muzzleloader hunting, some archery hunting in those, which will extend that season for you as well.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, this is Steve Rose. You might want to mention the fact that some of the counties in Virginia are actually split. For instance, Suffolk, if you look down there in Tidewater area, it is split. And it does state in the book the Dismal Swamp Line. Important to know that because it's literally one road that separates that for the rest of Suffolk.
Yeah, thank you. So what he's speaking to here is, like he said, Suffolk here. You can see the color changes here on that portion of the county. And so that's going to change the season for those folks that live in that particular area. But again, here in Pennsylvania County, Campbell County, Amherst, Nelson, you also have those split colors as well. So if we scroll down, like he was mentioned before, it will tell us in here. Let me find it. It gives you a particular road name that talks about where that actual split is. So just make sure that you understand which side of that road you live on, because it's going to change your season for those two. As you can see, it's got that peach color versus like that bluish purple color too. So just make sure if you're in one of those split counties, you really read where that actual split is and understand which side of those that you're hunting on. Let me go back up here real quick. I'm going to try to wrap it up here in the next 5 minutes so we can get people through the evening as well. So I mentioned earlier about antlered versus antlerless deer. Either sex deer tags, commonly called buck tags, may be used on antlered deer or antlerless deer. Antlerless deer only tags, commonly called doe tags, may be used on antlerless deer. Antlered deer must have visible antlers above the hairline, like mentioned before. An antlered deer must be tagged with an either sex deer tag. So just make sure you understand which tags you have available, and make sure you understand that prior to harvesting those animals, because if you don't have that particular tag available to you, you can get yourself in a bind there with those. So they give you some nice images here to look at too. So as I said earlier, like this particular deer, commonly referred to as a button buck, doesn't have any antler protruding through the skin there, so they're considered an antlerless deer. This deer here on the right is an antlered buck because it has antler protruding through the skin there. Sometimes, though, those little antlers can get extremely hard to see, which is where binoculars come in handy. You know, we're speaking to binoculars early to be able to really identify that. One of the questions people have, too, when we get into those late season, those counties, you get into shed antlered bucks. Shed bucks. So a shed buck is considered an antlerless deer as long as there is no antler present, like you see in the picture to the right.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Someone just asked about specific like sizes of a deer legal to harvest, and that reminded me. If you want to like briefly describe like antler point restrictions, that might be getting a little in depth, but
Sure.
might as well bring it up.
So
just describe it, maybe.
For particular body size, which it sounded like that question was, there is no restrictions on particular body sizes. So if it's a fawn, you're allowed to harvest a fawn. If it's a big mature deer, you can harvest a big mature deer. What Paul was mentioning with antler point restrictions, where that get into is some counties have what they call APRs, or antler point restrictions. So you can see Allegheny, Bath, Highland, and Rockbig counties have those, and it'll list out exactly what that is. So make sure you understand what those actual restrictions are. Some of them may say that you can must have at least 4 antlered points that are 1 inch or longer on the side of the antlers. So if you're harvesting bucks in those particular areas, they have to have at least 4 antler points to be a legal harvestable buck with those antler point restrictions. And then once again, I want to refer back to this because we were talking about either sex days. Antlerless deer may only be taken during designated either sex deer hunting days. Yeah. All right, I got probably time for maybe one more question if somebody else has that.
Yeah, Mike, I got a couple, just two quick questions for you. First one is, if I want to, during general firearms, if I want to take my muzzleloader out, I can do that, right?
Correct. Yep.
All right, and then the second one, in Augusta County, if I'm on private land, there shouldn't be a restriction on doe days, right?
Let's see here. You said Augusta?
Yes, sir.
So Augusta County here falls within that same as Shenandoah, that dark blue color. So your season 16th through the November 30th of either sex days, which is that full season that's listed there. So as long as you're not listed out on these otherwise stated areas in Augusta County and you're on private land, that is correct. Except for, like we mentioned earlier, on National Forest and Department-owned lands in Augusta on November 30th is the only day that you can do that on. So as long as you're hunting on private land, it's that full season that you see here. Does that clarify that?
Thank you. Man, I've now got one more. What if they go on national forest land after you shoot them on private?
So private and national forest is its own. So like if you shoot a deer on your private land during your regular season, you're legal to do so. And then if you go hunt on national forest, as long as you're on that day that it specifies, then you can also do that as well.
I think he's saying if after he shoots it and it walks onto.
Oh, I see what you're saying. As long as you can show and you can prove that you actually harvested it on your private land, you'll be fine there.
You probably want to reach out to your local CPO,
Yeah.
and it's one of those ethical considerations. If you're hunting right near the boundary, there's a good likelihood that it may do that.
Right.
You know, I would try to avoid that, but in that
That's where the fence
situation,
line is.
yeah, I would, from an ethical perspective, I would try to stay away from boundaries that close personally. But if something like that happens, if you made an honest mistake or something, and there's a antlerless season on the private but not on the national forest, and that's where it goes, I would contact your local CPO as soon as you can and try to get it straightened out.
Let me just reiterate what Jeff
Thank
said
you.
about contacting your CPO. Just calling the sheriff's department would be a good idea to probably get your CPO's number before you go out hunting. Just if you got any questions or if something happens, you'll have his number on call. Most of them are, great people. They're all treasure troves of information. I think it's probably a safe bet.
Cool. Well, we're going to wrap it up here for the night just so we can get people out for even though people have to go to work tomorrow. One other thing, I'll also send this out in that email with the links as well. There's a QR code you can scan here. If y'all don't mind, do me a favor and just scanning that, filling out the survey. That's going to help us better improve this course for folks in the future. It's got some questions guided towards information. How do we do, the clarity of our information in those. So I really appreciate if, everybody took a minute or two to fill that out so that we can get that feedback and improve this for folks in the future. I appreciate everybody attending the course tonight. It was a lot of fun. It's good and exciting. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. You can email me. I'm sure Paul and Jeff, if they are willing to, Jason, Robert, Steve, and all of them, if they want to put their email in the chat too, you're welcome to reach out to those. Ask any questions. As Jeff stated before, don't hesitate to reach out to your local conservation police officer. Ask them any questions you do. That's what they're there for. So without further ado, I appreciate y'all joining us tonight. Go look at those workshops, mentor programs, check out the National Deer Association website, become a member, and just keep looking out for stuff you want to join in the future. Thank y'all.
Hey, Mike, are you going to send out that survey link in the email?
Yeah, it's going to be attached in there as well. Awesome. Well, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.